Good afternoon, everybody. Even though this is a little bit later than our standard starting time, this is our third edition of Ease Class, and I am going to be your instructor. It's Jiv. Today we're going to be going over more so movement. In the first two episodes, we started with system offense and then defense for the second episode. So I wanted to talk more about the nuances of movement in Ease Laugh and more so how people get a little bit more used to moving around in this game. With the exception of, I want to say, like three characters, technically everybody does have a standard run. Cecil's run is a directional hold, and his 666 is a step. Meanwhile, you have Siska, whose step crosses up. Yagabi is a step character. Saving Tina is weird because she's a run like Cecil who holds 6. She'll trip after, I want to say, 120 frames or so. I can give that example right there. I can't wait for the load in to be a little bit faster, but it's okay. So, see, Saving Tina after, yep, around 120 frames, she will just trip. The trip is a low. It's pretty funny. But more so, she moves around the screen through flight. So, movement in Ease Laugh is very typical of your other standard anime fighters. You have your, walk speeds in this game aren't too bad. You have your forward dash and your back dashes. If you remember, or if you were able to watch the first video, back dashes in this game take your guard bar, so you want to be very, very, very careful about how you utilize them to their benefit, mainly because backdashes in this game are mostly really good. Even the ones that aren't great aren't bad. That's the thing. Forward dashes in this game are very snappy. You have your air back dash, your air forward dash, and something about this game that some people still don't know is that you could super jump, double jump, typical anime stuff, but you can also super jump, air dash, and so on and so forth. Like you can super jump, double jump, and you get a lot of height. This is very, 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 very important. So the main reason behind that is solely there's a lot of options in this game that cover a horizontal space, and the vertical space, while safe, is also relatively unsafe against characters like mine, who has 6D, which reaches at the top of air dash range, which is very, 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 very important. So the reason why super jump, double jump is as good as it is because it is a very good option to avoid a lot of these attempts at stopping IAD. But what's most important about that is that, again, if you're in the air, you can't block grounded normals. So you can kind of just use it, preserve your second air option, and then either come down with something or do something else to avoid a very specific option. That said, like I said, a lot of these options are very character specific. Kadora is probably the most mobile character thus far, besides Saving Tina, mainly because she has double air dash, which means she's the only character in this game that can do this. Which is very important, even though she's most likely going to stick closer to the ground because that's where she's more effective, unless she's throwing out bolts and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. The reason why moving around, like in any fighting game, and knowing how to move around is so important is because a lot of people tend to box themselves in terms of movement, and this is a game where every single 6A is frame 1 head and vuln, so people are going to try a lot of their typical ID that and then get clapped because 6A is there. So it's really, really good to diversify the air movement and sometimes not even being in the air at all. For step dash characters, it kind of sucks because obviously your neutral is a little bit gated behind the fact that you will always go a set distance, even though you can immediately dash block out of your dash. Obviously, Kadora is a little bit of an exception because she has a little bit of dash startup. So she kind of just has to hold that. That said, you have other characters that have very, 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 very good options. Kadora does have really good air-to-air and anti-air options to beat said things. A lot of characters in this game, especially with meter, do as well. So it's about combining your options with the movement itself. You know, just simple, typical things that you want to do. But what makes it so different in this game, especially, is if you have meter. Why? Fatal Air Dash. Fatal Air Dash is very, very, very important, namely because of how you can cancel into it and out of it. You can cancel it from normals. So you can keep that in mind. This is also really important for mix-up, but more so than anything, it is important to get around the screen because zoning in this game is not weak by any chance or any facet, and buttons can be really, really big and take up a lot of space. So technically, imagine you're doing this. Boom. If you use the air option and you really want to get across the screen, you can air dash and then air dash again with meter. Doing this allows you to bypass a lot of the restrictions of your air dash, as you can tell. You air dash lower off of a fatal air dash. There is technically no height restriction on fatal air dash. See? See? That is extremely important because now you can turn a neutral situation for the cost of 1 bar into an offensive situation your opponent has a slightly harder time reacting to, even though 6As are still ever present. It just allows you to do other things. Mine is a very, very, very good user of things like this because, yeah, you can 6A him. Holy lag. But yeah, think of it like that. And when you start thinking of moving around like that, dealing with how really, really strong anti-airs are becomes a lot easier to, manage. Dealing with them isn't as hard as like, oh, I'm in the air now. I committed to a button. Now they're gonna anti-air me. You can preserve your air options or fatal air dash, or just don't even engage. Air backdashing in this game is also really good. Boom. If your characters have the option for it. Alternatively, it just is a very good way to disengage. However, you have to remember, because it is a backwards movement, it will take your guard gauge. So you actually have to leverage how you escape or how you try to run away from your opponent. That's something a lot of people struggle with the most, and that's why situations tend to snowball, because people will, and I've seen it, because I even have a bad habit of doing it, people will attempt at their hardest to escape everything. And backdashes in this game are not frame 1. They are frame 2 or worse. Well, unless, you spent meter. Etc., etc. For now, all that is mostly dealing with moving around and throwing out fast enough buttons in either air to ground or preventing air to air situation, because a lot of JAs in this game also are anti-jump. They will stop your opponent from trying to fly in at you. They're not super slow. Some of them are pretty good. Some are slightly faster, but the utilization is relatively similar across the cast. So just keeping that in mind allows you as the player to deal with other defensive responses that isn't just 6A. Because funnily enough, sometimes 6Aing is not always the best answer. And the reason that is because it goes back to how your opponent decides to use meter. Remember, anything that has the super flash on a fatal shift does have invuln, even if it's for a little bit. So something I know Oracle does a lot, a very good Siska player, is that they'll commit to an option and then spend meter at the last possible second to put you in a situation. So committing to things like that is really, 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 really important. And knowing how your opponent likes to respond on defense is also extremely important. Another really good movement tool that turns into an offensive tool, funnily enough, is air throw. You cannot ID air throw in this game unless it's at the end of the air dash. So remember that thing about Fatal Shift Air Dash that I just said, guys? Where you can quite literally do whatever you want out of it. There is no height restriction on it. Remember, Fatal Shift also removes any and all restrictions on your character in their current state, which means you get to do this. You don't have to wait for your air dash to end to throw somebody, which means if somebody's committing to an approach, you can use your movement and your resources to prevent them from moving in that way. Boom. So on and so forth. See? So you can use it as an anti-fuzzy jump tool. Movement is extremely multifaceted, and the thing about this game is that a lot of characters have very, 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 very varied ways of moving around. Tina, being the glacier-like zoner that she is, also has probably the most amount of movement options, is that all of her movement options are tied to her resource. Unlike Kadora, who just has a double jump naturally and a double air dash. Meanwhile, Tina has Kirby jumps. But they also use her calorie and they use her guard gauge. So her constantly moving around is, while beneficial, is also really, 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 really dangerous for her, because overusing her movement in a very, very predictable manner will leave her with no resources, and worse, no guard gauge. Not having a guard gauge or getting guard crush in this game is basically death. So at that point, it's taking a lot of care into how you move around. GG does this a lot, where they'll do that and then zone you because they know that you're going to try to commit to something. So like, imagine, boom, and then it'll mix you up off of that, because not only do they stall it, now they get, boom, you try to commit to the anti-air, you get fried. Saving Tina also has ways around dealing with anti-airs as well, but I'm not as versed in as Tina compared to some of the other players in here. But she does have anti-6A tech with flight plus her normals. So you can just move around in a very, 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 very odd way to dissuade constant 6A attempts, no matter how good the 6A is. And some anti-airs in this game are like, as you can see, really good. It kind of plays in that dynamic between how good and rewarding anti-airs are in this game, especially on counter hit, and how good baiting the anti-air is, because anti-airs in this game, for what it looks like, still have lengthy recovery. Some characters have jab anti-airs, but those are also slightly harder to use against some of these air buttons. So again, that's where moving around comes into play, because even then, movement in this game is really, really snappy, so you can kind of just do things. Now, I bet you're wondering, what about the characters that don't have traditional runs? Well, again, let's talk about Fatal Shift. Because, as I've shown with mine, you can Fatal Shift on the ground and in the air. Tina is another character that benefits from this heavily. She has a run, but it isn't fast. So what if you want to be at point B as fast as you wanted to? There you go. You just run at them, etc. So on and so forth. The only downside to this is, again, because you fatal shifted the normal, you have to commit to something. Or fatal shifted the dash, you have to commit. You can't fatal shift. Yeah, you can't fatal shift forward backdash. It doesn't work. You have to commit to something, even if it's a jump, but then at that point you kind of used up your fatal shift state, but you still are left with the fatal shift scaling. So at that point it's like, that is a commitment that you have to actually do something about. You are not allowed to just do things for free, as goofy as it looks. Siska, however, yeah, she can fatal shift forward, dash backdash, which puts her in a command jump state, which is cool and all, until you realize that none of her command jump follow-ups really have... they all have answers, and some of them are consistent between responses. So you actually have to be very careful about how you use it. So again, mileage varies, but risk also varies. You have to be very, very careful about how you move around in this game. So let me loop this back around to what I'm really planning on getting into, or what I planned on getting into. The major dynamic of moving around in this game being tied to guard gauge, dealing with opponent anti-airs, as well as other opponent options like air-to-airing you, or stuffing your approaches, can be solved in one of two ways. Not always air dashing. Honestly, just raw IDing in this game has its own inherent risk because, again, you can't act immediately if it's obviously a slower button. Oops. Boom. And even then, JAs in this game are overheads. They're good at stopping certain things, but they're not always the best sort of answer. See? And so on and so forth. Like, they're good. Like any ID normal in any anime game, they're good. Just effectiveness starts to vary depending on defensive response, as well as how predictable you make those air dashes look. So, for all intents and purposes, you could just jump around, save your options to bait out certain anti-airs, but you also have to be careful because you can't block in the air. You can parry. You can ID parry, but ID parry isn't instant either. You have to travel a bit before. Boom. And guess what? You kind of lose to really simple options. Also, you're stuck in landing recovery if you do that, so that's also risky. A lot of it does come down to varying how you want to move around. And that's kind of like the biggest crux of EZLAF movement in relation to a lot of the grounded options in this game. You have to be really, really careful. Because moving around badly either gets you staircased to the ground and then, you know, air unblockable. Because there are some genuine air unblockable setups that guard crush if you jump into them wrong or try to escape badly. And in relation to that, that just goes to show about how quick games can flip based on how you move around and how you position yourself on the ground or in the air. If you play a character with a really fast run, mine, Tai, technically Cecil, Maybe Serena when she gets completed, if she keeps that run cycle or the run speed in her animation. Um, Other characters that I'm thinking about, mainly them, and even Kadora post dash startup because Kadora is really good at getting from point A to point B, really goddamn fast. Sometimes you don't even need to jump. And while air options in this game are really brolic, all of them are. A lot of them just are insane. You still have to keep the idea of how your opponent moves around in mind. Because 6As are good. If your character has an anti-air 2C, that's really good. Even though it's not frame 1 head invul and it's more frame 3 to frame 4, they will beat really, really bad jump-ins. And usually the slower anti-airs have more reward. Usually. That said, it's a pretty short session thus far because movement is really typical of just paying attention and not overstepping your bounds in terms of how you want to move around, because the moment your movement gets predictable, games tend to snowball harder because then escape options become worse. Because again, backdashes aren't frame 1, and defense in this game, while is good as it is, being on the back foot, especially with either reduced guard gauge or less meter than your opponent, is really rough. Alright, I've been yapping for about 20 minutes. Does anybody in the chat right now have any sort of questions about movement? I will accept questions for a little bit longer, and then I'll probably wrap it up because talking about movement is pretty cut and dry. It's pretty simple. It's just in relation to how EZLAF mechanics are, there's ways you can use your movement to beat your opponent, or how they will use those same resources to stop you from being predictable.
Excuse me. I do have one question about movement in this game,
What's up?
and that would actually be so be focused more on the backdashes. So, in with other backdashing games, normally there's some sort of invincibility. How does backdashes really work like this? Is it strike and bone, grab and bone? And if it is in bone, is there any way to like effectively punish a person for using that with a counter hit or something like that?
So backdashing in this game is really, really good because depending on your character, it either puts you in a completely different state or the amount of distance you get is insane. Realistically, you're punishing your opponent by making them spend their guard gauge. If you really want to catch them lacking, it's usually on startup because again, backdashes in this game are not frame 1. The invuln lasts a decent bit. It's like I think it's like 2 to 10 for some characters, 2 to 13, and there is still a little bit of recovery on some of them, so you can catch them lacking with either a big button or a big punish tool, but you have to be a little bit more careful. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But yeah, so backdashes in this game are pretty strong. Some of them you kind of just have to let rock, but you have to know that backdashing in this sense puts them in a worse spot. Siska's backdash is really good because it does this. She gets to be in the air, but she's also in the air. She technically has less options after she does like a backdash option if it's not going into her command jump options, because she could just do this. Which, while it puts her back into neutral, Siska neutral is not amazing. It's good, but what does she really do from here besides throw a fireball that doesn't even go full screen? Unless she spends meter on it. So it really does depend. The punishes can be like, simply put, You meaty with a button that's not just air unblockable, but also safe on block, which so happens to be a lot of these close B normals in this game. Staggers in this game are relatively short, and they also are good at catching certain forms of movement. There's a reason why mine can just sit here and do this to people. Block. On. So there's a reason why I could just do this. Do that. Because while it is a 0 on block situation, which means anybody with a 4-frame button, which is most characters in the game, can counter poke, you do not want to challenge. If you think you can escape, you also have to bank on the fact that you won't get guard cancel backdash, in which guard cancel backdash in this game, while is a really neat way of escaping bad offense, there you go. Boom, okay. That happens. Why is my game lagging? That happens. Let me turn some of these gauges off because bar UI display. Let's just put display off. There, right? So you could do boom, punished. Some characters will just punish. See? So on and so forth. Jesus. So keeping that in mind, it makes dealing with backdashes a lot simpler than you think. Because if people are just going to backdash in neutral, I mean, that's cool. And then you hit somebody with a button that moves them forward. Punish. Another way I can explain it is, funnily enough, I've been playing a lot of Under Night, and Under Night backdashes operate really, not necessarily similarly, but in a funny way where you meaty with a button, and if you catch the backdash, you just press a button that's really active. And it will more often than not beat the backdash attempt. So think of it like that. So it's like, oh yeah, you backdash, that's cool and all. Thank you. So now they're down a guard gauge. And they're in the corner. Now let's say they just so happen to backstep out of your offense, right? Like what I brought up earlier. And that's cool and all, just like back jump, backdash, right? Boom, right? See? Nice backdash. Riskier, but nice backdash. See? So on and so forth. She can still act out of that a lot sooner, but then you're just like... So on and so forth. So think of it like that. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Etc., etc. Also, there is a bevy of hard knockdown moves in this game, so take that as you will. It'll really dissuade people wanting to jump out of your offense. That said, I got another question in the voice text. So using Fatal Shift on a dash, air dash gives you invincibility and allows you to act out of it freely. And can you Fatal Shift to air dash really low to the ground? Yes. So as I showed earlier, boom, air dashing in this game has a height requirement. You cannot air dash super low to the ground unless you delay your air dash, which is also, funnily enough, a good way of introducing altered movement. So keep that in mind. But if you fatal air dash instantly off the ground, boom, you get instant, not necessarily instant offense, but offense becomes harder to react to, because now, boom, there you go. Take that as you will. It gives some invincibility. If there is a screen flash on a fatal shift, there is a little bit of invincibility. I believe I can show the hitbox for that. because more often than not, you could tell that you're invuln if, yeah, if the hitbox darkens for a bit. Oh wait, boom. I might be incorrect on that. Let me just double check. No, there's no invuln. Okay, just had to double check. So it's less that there's no invuln. Whew, didn't want to share some misinformation. But the fact of the matter is that the movement is fast. That's what makes it matter more. But also, against anti-airs, because it's freezing the screen, you can also do things like do other things. Like, you could try to anti-air me, and then you gotta deal with mine throwing the sword at you. Good luck. Other characters have different ways of managing that. Let's say you fatal shifted. Yeah, okay, no. That's not gonna work. That'd be really funny. But yeah, restrictions are gone. Think of it like that. This game is really multifaceted in how you can spend meter. After knocking down an opponent from afar, like Kadora 236AA, should you get close to them before they get up? What options can be done with movement? Okay, so that's more so character specific options, mainly because Kadora likes being in control of the neutral game because that's how she gets all of her reward. That character doesn't get as much reward up close unless she's deciding to mix you up or gets a sigil on top of you. She tends to poke around in neutral with her super long projectiles and trap tools, as well as her really big specials. Or specials that dissuade movement, which is also something you have to look for, which is extremely, extremely important. I can show some Kadora stuff, mainly. Oh, wrong character. Also another character that has a lot of ways of dissuading bad movement, or just movement in general, simply because of how grenade exists. Things like that. If you look at the arc, it catches people doing really, 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 really bad movement if they're like trying to super jump or whatever. But normally if she's doing grenade, she's not going to do grenade in neutral like that. She's going to have a grenade on top of you. And so on and so forth. Kadora. So, because you brought it up, I can answer this right now. So, let's say, yeah. You knocked him down, right? First off, it doesn't hard knock down, which is also really, really big. So on and so forth. Boom. Alright. You could run in on them, but you also have to remember you're playing a character with dash startup. You can stay right here and do things like that. But again, if you really want to do Kadora movement stuff, you also have air dash, forward dash, air dash, forward dash, air dash, back dash. She has way of just setting a sigil, boom. If you really want the sigil, one day I'll stop dropping frames. One day you could just like, hey, knock them down. It's like, all right, I don't feel like being here, or I want to maintain my positioning right here. You could just have a sigil on screen. Set it off. Now you use this. Now you can use the sigils to back up your movement. That is how you move around with that character. How useful would you say using Fatal Ground Dash is? I know it's good for Yag because he loses the charge restriction, but what about anyone else? So Fatal Ground Dash is really, really good because if I was wrong about the Air Dash invuln, I shouldn't be wrong about the Ground Dash invuln. Yep. So, fun fact, if you Ground Dash with Fatal, you have a few frames of invuln, starting from frame 3, if memory serves. That is important because you can use Fatal Forward Dash to escape bad offense. If people aren't setting up parry or fatal safe offense, you can just do this. Granted, the reward off of these is a lot worse, and so on and so forth. Let me turn off the hitbox display. Boom. Boom. So take that as you will. You can do like Fatal Dash, run through, and then run through a string that's predictable or has a lot of recovery. Like, for the most part, I believe everybody's ABC strings are safe, but when you press another button afterwards, things get a little bit dicey. So like, right? That's gap. Yeah, that's gapless. So it'll be something like, boom, right? Okay. Oh yeah, no, that's just catches it. There you go. There, much better. Oops. There, see? If people are trying to like frame trap to catch other things, it introduces the aspect of fatal shift forward dash. So you could just so on and so forth. This is important because and so on and so forth. Oops. Or whatever, when my game decides to not drop frames. Thinking of it like that is extremely important because a lot of characters have like immediately good options out of Fatal Forward Dash, especially if they're committing too hard to their strings. If you see somebody do jab jab and you're trying to Fatal Dash though, you will lose. Do not even try that. Because more often than not, that's what people are checking for. Like, for example, oh, I almost crossed myself up. Etc. Etc. Oops, 2C. So yeah, think of it like that. Reasonably, you could also. Oh, yeah, fatal backdashing isn't really that good. Fatal forward dash is what you want, etc. Technically, you can also do this. Why? Throw is one frame. So, like, the easiest out on defense, if you don't want to try too hard to get a punish, your first immediate punish, just throw them. Pretty simple, honestly. Any other questions? Just keeping my eye out on the chat just to see if I can answer anything. Yeah, see, Fatal, yeah. Chofin, who is a longtime Yagami player, Fatal Backdash is just Yagami Backdash, which is a spot dodge. So, like, he technically has the easiest out. on defense like that, given that character's defense is already insane. Oh, like so. Oh yeah, I forgot. You still can't. I crossed myself up. Oh! 5A has more blocks then. Right. There we go. Come on. What if the game doesn't want to lag? Oh, the delay. Right. There. So on and so forth. And like Chofin said in the chat, because you're Yagabi, and it's really funny, you could do things like that. Yeah. No, yeah. So on and so forth. Etc., 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 etc. That's only on like super long gaps, but so on and so forth, and whatever. The character just does that. Best defense in the game. It's pretty funny. Alternatively, if you're really about it, and I mean you're really about it, and you hate your opponent, like a lot, with this character, so yeah, you can turn defense into movement, and then turn that movement into offense. You can also just move differently. Realistically, it's all about how you move. Like I've said this like ad nauseum so far in the past like 40 minutes. Knowing how to play against your opponent's defensive roulette against how you move at them is just common sense. If you're going to constantly jump at somebody, them 6As are going to hurt. And they're going to hurt a lot. I mean a lot, a lot. These 6As hurt. But then again, that's also where, like, you know, how you learn how to move or how you deal with movement is important, because I promise you, and it happens to everyone, post nerf or not, Tina 6D is going to make you never want to jump again. Why? Because of that. And she can hold it. Ooh, single digit FPS. Good lord. So on and so forth. You're going to want to jump at this character, and you're just going to see this. And then you're never going to want to jump again. I'm not joking, by the way. That is how we learn how to move around in this game. Seeing obnoxious anti-air buttons, or buttons you never want to get hit by, and then getting hit by them. In this game, any button is anti-air? Not necessarily, no. Some characters are designed to be that. 6D is designed to be her full screen anti-air. But remember that thing I said about jumping? Yeah, air unblockable. Grounded normals are air unblockable, unless said otherwise. The only other one that technically isn't an air unblockable is like, what, Cecil 5A? No, even then I think Cecil 5A is air unblockable. Yeah, no, it's still air unblockable. So, like, imagine you're just fighting against, like, Junie or Gigi, and you gotta deal with this, and you're like, I'm gonna jump here. No, you are not. No, you are not. You are not going to do that. Some moves in this game are just coded to be air unblockable, by the way. So like it's not even just like grounded normals are air unblockable. Some moves are just straight up air unblockable. So, right? Remember that thing I said? Damn, I got cooked. See? Got cooked. You just make it whiff. You have to make her whiff. Or, guess what? Boom, I avoided it. Because I preserved my air option. Etc., etc. Alright, it's been 45 minutes. Does anyone else have any other questions to save me from ranting about the same thing? Because I feel like I've done that. Even though movement is a pretty simple concept to understand. It's just moving around in this game can be very intimidating because buttons in this game just feel like they always anti-air sometimes. And you just have to hold that. If nobody else has any other questions, I feel like today was a pretty successful class then. If anybody else wants to know anything about this game, not just here in this EaseLast Discord, but out on YouTube as well, I will have links to all of our resources, mainly from the Mizumi Wiki, put in the description of the video, as well as the other two videos. I'm going to make them all into a playlist for easier access, and then for those in the EaseLast Discord, when episode 3 is uploaded, I will put that in the chat as well, as I always do. So if nobody else has any other questions, class dismissed. This is Jiv. I will probably be back doing more of these a lot more often. I apologize for the massive delay. Life got crazy, especially after Combo Breaker. Also, I went to Anime Expo, so I mean, oops. Had fun though. It was crazy. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys later then.